talking, I don't sweat that. If they don't trust me either, I respect that. But she need down the ride, oh, I bet that. Ooh, I slide for my people, don't forget that. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. Ooh, I slide for my people, don't forget that. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. Ooh, I slide for my people, don't forget that.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is JH. How you doing, Postal family? Is everybody good? Is everybody cool? Everybody clean? Are you crisp? Are you feeling irie today? Let's talk. Well, being that we are the Postal Service, and we have been around since who knows when, we have an outdated payroll system. It's apparent. It's just apparent. We just have everything old. And apparently what ended up happening with the rural carriers and their pay set, 'cause I don't even think the rural carriers know how to get paid. But because of those two past major payroll errors, we have an article, and maybe something will get done about this outdated payroll system. Now, before you guys shut it off, just remember that when we have grievances or we get updated contracts, we have to wait for that, what they call retro pay. And we end up waiting 6, 8, not 12 months sometimes to get this back pay. So where this is actually starting may indeed help everybody, because this happens every 3 years whenever they update the contract. So let's read this article and see what we get from it. I'm going to read it the best I can. It may be boring to some, but we don't go to work just to look pretty. We go for pay. Let's talk. 2 separate payroll errors at the Postal Service over the past few months kept thousands of rural letter carriers from getting their full paychecks on time. Now the union is demanding USPS modernize its payroll system and that the agency pay harsh penalties to compensate rural carriers if this problem persists. I think every union should be jumping on this, because we be waiting forever to get this back pay. The National Rural Letter Carriers Association filed a national level grievance this week over the Postal Service repeated failure to pay rural carriers correctly on time. Now, this did suck. You guys remember when this happened. USPS in September experienced a programming issue with this payroll system that caused more than 52,000 rural letter carriers to miss their regular paycheck or receive a partial paycheck for the pay period that ended on September 1st. The programming error impacted both career and non-career carriers, but it did not impact all rural carrier employees, USPS officials later told lawmakers. Doesn't matter, one person not getting paid is too many. As a temporary workaround, USPS offered impacted rural carriers a salary advance. I don't think it's considered an advance if you owe them the money. No. That means you're paying them. Issued in a money order. That sucked as well. Rural carriers who accepted the money orders would receive 65% gross pay, a rough estimate of their typical take-home pay. Carriers would then pay back the salary advance once they received their actual paycheck. I think it would have been fair if they just, once their check came, they just called it even. That's just my opinion, but life don't work that way. NRLCA President Don Matson, in a video message sent this week to union members, said it's not 100% of the carriers were provided these money orders. A USPS spokesperson told Federal News Network in September that 68% of impacted employees as of September 12th requested and received a salary advance in the form of a no-fee money order. See, why should they request it though? See, I don't think they should have requested anything. I don't think anybody comes to work not to get paid, regardless of whether or not we live paycheck to paycheck. I work, pay me. Pretty simple. The late back pay, he added, made it harder for rural carriers to pay rent, mortgages, and other reoccurring expenses on time. This is true. Some of us have stuff on auto pay. Matheson said USPS also didn't pay impacted employees their equipment maintenance allowance, a mileage reimbursement for carriers who use their own private vehicles on their delivery routes. We were assured it was a one-time thing, Matheson said in a follow-up interview with Federal News Network, but it was just a matter of time before something else happened because the payroll system is so outdated. Outdated payroll system. Just days before Thanksgiving, I remember this, USPS announced a timekeeping error that would prevent another 2,200 rural carriers from receiving their regular paycheck on time that week. The agency once again offered a salary advance to impacted employees, but Matheson said a union official had decided enough is enough. I don't know why they didn't decide that the first time, and the rural carriers deserve to be paid correctly and on time. This is true. The most basic employer requirement is to pay the workers who perform the work. True. To continue to fail at the most basic of employer responsibilities, especially at this time of year when so many carriers not only work long hours through the holidays, but also prepare for the holidays, is unacceptable. Now, before we continue, I do know that a lot of the temporary people that come into the post office during the holidays, this has been a yearly thing for probably the last umpty-something years. They run into these situations where they're not properly in the system because they're, I guess, temporary, or they're just doing the holiday thing. And a lot of them end up having to get a paper paycheck and, you're getting a salary advance. That's discouraging to a lot of people. Now, when these people come in right in the middle of the holidays, they're getting badgered, beat up, broken down there's culture shock to these people for the first 2-3 weeks that they get there. And then to be told that we don't have your check, man. I don't know what happened. And to think that the person wants to come back to work the next day, it happens. It's crazy. As the part of the national level grievance, Matheson said the union is demanding USPS face harsh penalties that would be paid to rural carriers if USPS encounters more problems paying them correct amount on time. If they continue to harm carriers by not paying them correctly and on time, then there needs to be a monetary penalty for each instance that occurs, he said. Now, I know that this happens with UPS. They have this whole, they're serious about it. Maston said the penalties would also encourage USPS to modernize its legacy payroll system. I agree with that. I think everybody should be agreeing with that. That would be the way to incentivize them. If they need to spend money to update their equipment or the computer system, that money would be better served to do that as opposed to leave the payroll system in place and spend the money to pay carriers for being harmed, he said. It's a penalty if they want to look at it that way. But ultimately, getting paid shouldn't be an issue. Certainly not this often and not in these large numbers. As far as the next steps, the union will set up meetings with USPS to discuss a remedy to the grievance. If USPS and NRLCA can't reach a resolution both parties are satisfied with, a third-party arbitrator will hear the case and issue a remedy. That will be the final play, but in the interim, we'll be scheduled for meetings and try to get some kind of resolve that's satisfactory to the union, Maston said. While Maston said the USPS payroll error in September was the largest error of its kind he's ever seen, he said rural carriers encounter pay issues every pay period. A lot of people do. Now, with the rural carriers, I think it's a little more complex because they have really a complex pay system. But with everybody else, it's more of just punching a clock or scanning your badge, getting yourself in there. And it goes through a computer system. This computer system gets uploaded, goes into the tax system. Your supervisor is supposed to implement the right hours or just check the right hours and move on. So there should really not be any issues. The only time they have issues is when people play with people's money and times. But that's another topic for another day. The fact there are multiple carriers who are not correctly paid every pay period, it is just not in a large numbers we have seen lately, he said. But I assure you, If it is you who does not get a paycheck, it's a big deal. Anyway, you guys can read this article. It's in the Federal News Network. And obviously, if it gets there, it's a big deal. And it should be a big deal. It should be. Because the one thing that us hardworking postal workers do is... Excuse me. Okay, bear with me. Back to my beautiful scenery. There it is. The one thing that us postal workers do is work hard to get money. That's it. At the end of the day, you try to provide something for your family. And if you go to work and don't receive a paycheck, you know how much that hurts. I mean, especially being a government organization, there's really no need for that. And I'm hoping that Mr. Jajoy, when he finally gets all this stuff in place, that he gets a better payroll system, because it's coming that time when they start doing the contract negotiations over. They're going to negotiate. They're not going to agree. Then they're not going to implement it. And then later on down the line, we're going to go through the same scenario where we're going to have to wait for back pay again. And it's too much. Anyway, I got to get back to my clothes because they're drying right now. I have nothing on beneath this shirt, nothing. It's too much information for you guys. But you guys have yourself a great rest of your day, and we'll chat later. This is JH with a less animated video, and I'm out.
Unexpected expenses stressing you out? Get the money you need now with Loans for Feds, a program designed specifically for federal employees. Bad credit is not a problem. Application is fast and easy with same-day approvals. Apply now.